My name is Arianna. I'm 25 years old. Today I'm going to talk about the day that my dad, the owner, fired me to punish me. He had no idea I was buying the company. It's a pleasure to have you here. Stay tuned until the end and tell me which city you're watching from. I want to know how far my story has gone. And click on like, subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss the next stories here on the channel. I was 16 the first time I entered my father's company, not as his daughter, but as an unpaid intern. Just to learn the ropes, he said. For 9 years I worked in every department, accounting, logistics, sales. But no matter how much I learned or proved myself, I was always just Arianna, the assistant, the background noise. My brother Rodrigo, 3 years older, was the golden child. He never stayed long in any role, but was always introduced as the heir apparent. He had charisma, sure, but no discipline. Everyone knew it, but no one said it aloud, especially not to my father. My father, Roberto Lemos, was a man who saw only what he wanted to see. And he never wanted to see me. 3 weeks ago, everything finally broke. We were finalizing a shipment to an international client. It was a deal I had been working on for months. The client requested a change in delivery schedule at the last minute. Rodrigo, of course, ignored the request and sent the shipment as originally planned. When the client called to complain, my father didn't ask questions. He called a meeting, one of those big, dramatic ones with the entire office present. He walked in with fire in his eyes and said, "There's been a major failure in communication. A costly mistake. And someone will be held responsible." I felt the blood drain from my face. I knew Rodrigo had made the decision. I assumed my father did too. "Arianna," he said, turning toward me like a judge delivering a sentence, "you're dismissed. Effective immediately." The silence in the room was suffocating. I couldn't move. "You're firing me?" I managed to whisper. "You need to learn that actions have consequences. You've been warned before." That was a lie. I had never been warned. Rodrigo had. I looked around. No one met my eyes. Not even Clara, my closest coworker. I picked up my things in silence and walked out of the office where I had spent the last 9 years building something that would never belong to me. The worst part wasn't the humiliation. It was realizing that my father would rather protect Rodrigo's ego than acknowledge my value. And that in his eyes, I wasn't just less competent, I was disposable. That night, I didn't cry. I sat on the floor of my apartment in silence, staring at the wall. There's a numbness that sets in when you realize the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally never even saw you. 2 days later, I got a call. "Arianna? It's Marta Vasquez. I used to work with your father years ago." I heard what happened. I remembered her. Marta was a powerhouse in the logistics division before she left mysteriously. Rumor said my father forced her out after she confronted him about Rodrigo's constant failures. "I think it's time we talked," she said. We met at a small cafe in the city. Marta looked older, wiser, but just as fierce. "You deserved better," she said. "Your father never saw you as a future leader, only as a support system for Rodrigo." "I know," I said quietly. "You ever think about buying into the company?" she asked. I laughed bitterly. "I don't even have a job anymore." "But you know how everything works there. You know the clients, the weak points, the employees who are loyal to you, not to him. That kind of knowledge is currency." That was the moment something shifted inside me. "What are you suggesting?" Marta leaned forward. "I still have contacts. Some of them own shares in the company. Some are sick of your brother's incompetence. If you want in, I'll help you find a way." I didn't respond right away. My stomach turned with nerves. But underneath that, something else was waking up. Something I had buried long ago. "I'm in." Marta smiled. "Good. Then let's get to work." What my father didn't know was that the daughter he fired wasn't going away. He had taught me everything except how to quit. And now for the first time, I had nothing to lose. When Marta told me the first shareholder was ready to sell, I realized this wasn't just a plan, it was already happening. But none of them, not even my father, had a clue. And that gave me a power I had never known before. Over the next few weeks, I became a shadow in the business world my father ruled. No one saw me coming, because no one was looking. They had all bought into the same lie he did. That I was just a quiet girl who followed instructions and disappeared when things got serious. That made it easier to move. Marta was right. A surprising number of shareholders were frustrated, not just with Rodrigo, but with the overall direction of the company. They had tolerated years of mismanagement, trusting that my father would eventually see reason. He never did. And now, they were ready to cut their losses. Quietly, discreetly. All I had to do was be the one they could trust with the sale. He thinks you're gone. One shareholder told me during a meeting at a hotel lounge. Use that. So I did. I used the invisibility my father handed me like a gift. Each deal felt surreal. I'd sit at a quiet table, go over paperwork, sign contracts, tiny revolutions on crisp white pages. No one outside those rooms knew. Not Rodrigo, not my father. Every share I acquired gave me more than ownership. It gave me back a piece of myself they had tried to erase. Marta was my guide through it all. She had maps of the company's financial structure, lists of unhappy shareholders, and a sharp sense of timing. She didn't just want me to win. She wanted justice. Not revenge. Justice. Let him fall on his own, she said. You don't need to push. Just be ready when it happens. And it was happening faster than expected. Rodrigo had taken on a high-profile project without vetting the logistics. It was a disaster. Late shipments, lost inventory, a furious client pulling out. My father blamed the operations team, but most of them had already quit. Those who remained were stretched thin and terrified of speaking up. He's losing control, Marta said. They're covering for him, but not for long. One evening, I received a message from Clara, the coworker who hadn't looked at me the day I was fired. Arianna, she wrote. I owe you an apology. I froze that day. But if there's anything I can do now, I want to help. We're falling apart here. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I wrote back. Meet me tomorrow. Bring everything you can. We met in the same cafe where I had first met Marta. Clara came with documents, internal memos, supplier complaints, emails that had been ignored. She looked tired, defeated. I kept thinking he would notice, she said. That your father would see it. But he's blind when it comes to Rodrigo. We're the ones paying for it. I nodded. Not for much longer. That same week, I secured my 12th shareholder. I now owned a sizable portion of the company. Not the majority, yet but enough to call a vote when the time came. Marta and I reviewed the bylaws. The moment I reached 28%, I could call an emergency board meeting and push for a vote of no confidence in the current leadership. We were at 24%. 2 more deals, Marta said. Then we're ready. I didn't sleep much. My mind was a storm of past conversations, cold silences at family dinners, years of being told to be patient or support your brother. Now all of it echoed differently, not as wounds, but as warnings. And in the middle of that chaos, something unexpected happened. My father called me. Arianna, can we meet? His voice was stiff, formal, like he was trying to be gentle, but didn't know how. What for? Just to talk. I agreed. I needed to see him, to know what he knew. We met at his office, my old office. The place I had been fired from 3 weeks earlier. He looked tired, older. I was harsh, he said. I acted out of anger. I said nothing. Rodrigo's under pressure. The company's had setbacks. We need stability. I'd like you to consider coming back. It hit me then. He didn't know. He had no idea what I had already done. What I owned. What was coming. I appreciate the offer, I said slowly, but I think it's too late for that. He frowned. You're angry. That's understandable. But don't let pride ruin your future. I almost laughed. He was still teaching, still lecturing, still pretending this was about my feelings and not his failure to see what was right in front of him. I have to go, I said. But thank you for the meeting. His expression darkened. Arianna, this is a mistake. Don't walk away from your family. I looked at him and said quietly, you already did. And I walked out. By the end of that week, I secured the final 2 shareholders. 28%. Just enough. The board meeting was set. He didn't know it yet, but I was about to walk into the same room he fired me in, not as his daughter, not as a victim, but as something far more dangerous. As his equal. And maybe even more than that. What would you do if it were you? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe and activate the bell to receive all notifications so you don't miss the next story. The boardroom was exactly as I remembered it. Long glass table, stiff leather chairs, and the quiet hum of tension. It had been just over a month since I stood in that same room, eyes wide and hands shaking, as my father publicly fired me. Now I stood straighter. I wasn't shaking. Rodrigo was already seated when I walked in. He didn't even look up from his phone. Arrogance has a sound, and for him, it was silence. He didn't speak to people he didn't consider important. My father glanced at me, confused for half a second, then looked down at the agenda on the table. It listed the meeting as a routine shareholder update. He didn't know yet. Then the others began arriving, one by one, the shareholders I had met in quiet corners of the city. Each of them greeted me with a nod, an unspoken understanding. Marta was last. She took the seat beside me, calm and composed. She handed out folders. The room settled. Let's begin, my father said. I want to address recent challenges and present a revised strategy. Before we do that, I interrupted, I'd like to invoke Clause 9.3 of the company bylaws. He froze. For the first time in my life, I watched my father actually hesitate. That clause refers to a vote of no confidence, I said. Triggered by a shareholder holding at least 28%. His face turned a shade paler. You don't hold 28%. I opened the folder in front of me. Marta did the same. One by one, the other shareholders mirrored us, revealing the documentation they had prepared. I do, I said. Rodrigo looked up then. His mouth slightly open, like he was trying to process what he was seeing. What is this? He asked. Is this a joke? No, Marta said coolly. It's business. The vote proceeded. Formal. My father tried to argue, called it a betrayal, accused the shareholders of disloyalty. No one responded. The silence was louder than his shouting. One by one, the hands raised. A majority. Rodrigo was stripped of executive authority. My father was removed as CEO. Then they turned to me. Arianna, one of the elder board members said, we'd like to offer you the interim leadership role. Effective immediately. I nodded. I accept. I expected my father to storm out. But he didn't. He just sat there, staring at the wall like he was trying to rewrite the past 5 minutes with his mind. Rodrigo muttered something under his breath and left the room. No one stopped him. The meeting adjourned. As everyone began to leave, I stayed behind. My father remained seated. How long have you been planning this? He asked quietly. Since the day you fired me, I replied. He nodded slowly. You were always smart. I just never thought you'd go this far. I looked at him, not with anger but clarity. You never thought I'd go anywhere at all. I walked out. Later that evening, I sat in my new office. The same one that used to belong to Rodrigo. It smelled like cologne and stale ambition. I opened the windows. Clara knocked gently and stepped in. They're saying the mood in the building changed overnight. Good, I said. They respect you, Arianna. They're relieved. I nodded, but I didn't smile. It wasn't joy I felt. It was something deeper, an unfamiliar quietness. A sense that finally, I had stopped waiting for someone to see me. I had seen myself. And that was enough. The next morning, Marta stopped by with 2 coffees. You've got work to do. Always, I replied. As I reviewed the company's books, I realized the road ahead would be long. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. They had underestimated me. They wouldn't make that mistake again. The first few weeks as interim CEO were a storm of chaos, paperwork, and whispered skepticism. Some employees were thrilled to see Rodrigo gone. Others were confused, hesitant, waiting to see if I would crumble. I didn't. I arrived before everyone. I left after everyone. I took no special treatment. I spoke with every department head directly and asked questions no one had ever bothered to answer. I listened. And that, surprisingly, made people talk. No one's ever asked me how we manage the overseas logistics, one manager told me. They just hand down unrealistic deadlines. That changes now, I said. Rodrigo had left a mess. Contracts barely fulfilled, inventory miscounted, unpaid vendors, and a warehouse management system no one had fully implemented. I rolled up my sleeves and started cleaning. Marta and I met every night to discuss progress. She was my compass, not because she told me what to do, but because she reminded me who I was doing it for. Every step forward is a piece of your story taken back, she said. The hardest part wasn't the workload. It was navigating the quiet resentment. Some people in the company had tied their success to Rodrigo. They didn't say it, but I saw it in their eyes, the doubt, the discomfort. One of them was Eduardo, the head of sales. He had always backed Rodrigo, always echoed my father's praise of him. I just want to know the direction we're heading, he said during a tense meeting. Stable contracts. Fewer promises we can't keep. Systems that actually support our team, I replied. That's a lot of change. It's survival. I could tell he didn't like it. But I didn't need him to like it. I just needed him to work. Then came the first major test. An old client who had left after Rodrigo's botched project sent an inquiry. They were considering returning, but only if Rodrigo wasn't involved. He's not, I assured them. They asked for a site visit. The day they arrived, my father showed up at the office unannounced. He wasn't there to talk. He wanted to observe. To watch me. I let him. He stood silently in the corner of the conference room as I led the meeting, explained the new processes, addressed concerns. The client asked tough questions. I answered all of them without looking at Marta, without looking at him. When the clients left, satisfied and ready to sign a new deal, I finally turned to him. Still think I should have been an assistant forever? He didn't smile. You've changed. No, I said. You just never looked. He walked out without saying goodbye. The deal went through. It was the company's first major contract in 6 months. The mood in the office shifted again. People stopped whispering. They started asking questions. They started offering ideas. I hosted my first all-staff meeting the following week. I didn't make a speech. I laid out the plan. Clear, firm, transparent. I opened the floor. Clara spoke up. So did 3 other managers. Ideas started flowing. It felt real. It felt right. That night, I sat alone in my office and finally let myself cry. Not because I was sad, but because I had survived it. The humiliation, the exile, the invisibility. And I hadn't just made it through. I had taken control. But there was still one decision to make. Rodrigo had requested a meeting. He wanted to talk. Rodrigo showed up 20 minutes late. Typical. He wore sunglasses indoors, his suit jacket slung over one shoulder like he was still the golden boy walking into a party. But this wasn't a party. It was a closed-door meeting, scheduled on my terms in my office. I didn't offer him coffee. He took a seat across from me and sighed dramatically. So this is what it looks like when little sisters bite back. I said nothing. Look, Arianna, he started, leaning back like he owned the room. I think things got a little out of hand. You proved your point. You're in charge now. Great. But this exile, it's not necessary. You weren't exiled. You were removed. There's a difference. His smirk faltered for a second. Come on. You think the board didn't act out of emotion? Out of pressure? They're nervous. We all know how unpredictable transitions can be. I stared at him. What do you want, Rodrigo? He sat forward, finally dropping the pretense. I want to come back. Not as CEO. I know that's off the table. But something. A director's role. Consultant. Anything. You know I know this business. It was almost laughable. The only thing you know, I said slowly, is how to pass off your failures and let others clean them up. He scowled. You're bitter. I'm informed. Dad's miserable, by the way. I flinched before I could stop myself. He saw it. Yeah, he said, leaning in. He walks around like a ghost. Says you've become just like him, cold. Then he finally sees me. Rodrigo stood. You'll regret this. One day, you'll want family around. And no one will be left. I rose too. I already learned that lesson, Rodrigo. The hard way. You taught it to me. He walked out, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed, but I didn't move. The weight in my chest didn't come from his words. It came from the truth I had already made peace with. Some people don't change. And not everyone deserves to be let back in. Later that evening, Marta dropped by. How did it go? He wanted a role. A way back in. She nodded knowingly. Of course he did. I said no. Then you said the right thing. We sat in silence for a while, sipping coffee. It was a silence filled with understanding. That weekend, I went to visit my mother. She opened the door with a hesitant smile. She had stayed quiet during all of this, as always. Neutral, detached. Like a shadow in a house full of noise. I didn't think you'd come, she said. I didn't either. She stepped aside. I walked in. The house looked the same. The same photos of Rodrigo's graduations. The same wall of my father's awards. There was one picture of me, at age 10 in a school play. Faded. We sat in the kitchen. He says you've changed, she said softly. I haven't. I just stopped begging to be seen. She looked down at her hands. Your father doesn't understand what he did. That's not my responsibility anymore. She nodded. Quiet. Accepting but not fully understanding. That was her way. Before I left, I stood in front of that faded photo of myself. You could replace this, I said without turning around. My mother walked up beside me. He put that there. I didn't. I left without saying goodbye. Back at the office, I found a letter on my desk. It was from one of the employees in logistics. Just a thank you. Handwritten. No one's ever made me feel like what I do matters until now. It hit me harder than Rodrigo's threats or my father's silence. Because that was it. That was the whole reason I fought. Not just to prove something. Not just to take power back. But to build something better. For people who, like me, were always made to feel invisible. I didn't go back to my parents' house after that. Weeks passed. Then months. The company stabilized. We hit our first quarter of growth in almost 2 years. New contracts came in. Old clients returned. There was no big press release, no flashy announcement. Just quiet, steady progress. Exactly the kind of work I had always done in silence. Only now, I was finally in a position where silence meant power, not invisibility. Marta eventually stepped down from her advisory role. You don't need me anymore, she said, handing me a small brass key. To the cabinet in the back office. I kept everything you might need one day. I hugged her without saying much. She hated goodbyes. One morning, months after the last time I saw my father, Clara buzzed my office. Your father is here. Should I send him away? I paused. Then I said, let him in. He looked older than I remembered. Thinner. Eyes sunken. He didn't try to hug me. Just sat across from my desk, hat in his hands. I won't take much of your time, he said. I'm not here to ask for anything. I just wanted to see it. See what? What you did. What you built. I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to rescue him from his discomfort. He looked around the room. Your brother left the country. He's trying something new. Said he needed a break from all this. I raised an eyebrow. From accountability, you mean? He didn't argue. I was wrong, he said finally. About a lot of things. About you. Those words, which I used to ache for, didn't hit the way I thought they would. They landed, but softly, like a breeze instead of a storm. You never wanted me to lead, I said. You wanted me to support, to stay quiet, to make your life easier. He nodded. And you deserved more. We sat in silence for a few moments. I'll be leaving the board, he said. It's time. That got my attention. Why? Because I finally see that my presence here does more harm than good. And because I want to give you space to do what you were always capable of. For a moment, I saw him. Not the man who fired me, not the man who overlooked me, but the man who built something and didn't know how to pass it on. Goodbye, Dad. He looked at me, and for once, there was no power behind his eyes. Just grief. Regret. He nodded, stood, and left. I sat there, breathing in the silence he left behind. I didn't feel victorious. I felt released. 2 weeks later, we held a quiet ceremony to rename the main conference room Marta Vasquez Room, a tribute to the woman who stood by me when no one else did. She didn't come. I didn't expect her to, but I sent her a photo of the plaque. She replied with a single word: proud. The office culture began to shift. More collaboration. More women in leadership. We created a mentorship program for young professionals without connections. People like I once was. One afternoon, I walked past the executive suite and paused in front of the wall where the portraits of past leaders were displayed. My father's photo was there. So was Rodrigo's, briefly. A new one had just been mounted. Mine. I looked at it for a long time. Not for validation, but to remember. To remember that I had survived being overlooked, underestimated, and discarded. And that I had built something not in spite of that, but because of it. No revenge. No gloating. Just peace. Earned, not granted. I turned off the lights in the hallway and walked back to my office. The work was waiting. And this time it belonged to me. If you like stories like these, click like, subscribe, activate the bell and send it to someone you think will also like it.